today we're here at the College of DuPage with 3 guests today, and I'll just start out by having each of you introduce yourself. We'll start out down this
I'm Lauren Morgan. I teach at College of DuPage. I've been here for 23 years, and I taught high school for 8 years before I came here, so I still have a strong background with that. And primarily what I do at COD is teach our basic course, which is primarily public speaking. I was also the director of the forensics program, the competitive speech and debate program. This fall will be my first time not doing that for the school year.
All right.
My name is Anthony Zoubek. I teach at Bartlett High School in Bartlett, Illinois. I've been a high school teacher since 2006, instructing senior English, speech, and debate, and occasionally sophomore English before teaching. I was a freelance reporter, and I also worked for 7 years in a law office, which has come in handy with this project.
I'm Heather Danek. I've been teaching for 21 years at the bulk of that time at Minooka Community High School. I teach a basic public speaking course, also some drama courses. I teach an honors communications course, and I teach dual credit, Speech 101 for the community college in my town.
All right. Well, thank you all for being with us today, and glad we're getting to do this. I think it's a very important topic. So leading into that, before we get into, I think what will be probably the bulk of our conversation, I just want to ask each of you, why are you passionate about public speaking? What led you to the spot you're in now in your career and maybe personally? And we don't have to go down the line.
I can start. When I was in junior high, I moved around a lot, and so when I got to a school in my 7th grade year, I had a teacher who had kind of picked me out as somebody that she saw something in me, that I had a knack for it, and so she really encouraged that in me. So she got me involved in the plays and had me do a lot of oral reading and some, recording and oral interp and things like that. Then as I got into high school, I of course joined the competitive speaking team. I was a successful high school competitor. And when I went to college, I was going to teach English. I wanted to change the world and make kids love reading and writing. And I just found that the pull to performance, both theatrical performance and public speaking, was just too strong for me to ignore. And so I ended up changing my major. I still majored in English, but then I double majored in theater communication. And then as I went into my professional career, I was looking for English teaching jobs. And when I got the call from Minooka, they said, "We need somebody to teach public speaking. Can you do that?" And I said, "Yes, I can." And I just think it was the best fit for me as an educator, and not only just because of my training and my background and my passion for it, but I feel like I've served my students well there too. I'm enthusiastic about it, and I hope that they have come away with some enthusiasm for the discipline as well.
That's awesome.
I'll kind of build on what Heather said, because my story is sort of similar to hers. So I did forensics, competitive speaking in high school. But I was also involved in theater, and I didn't stick with the speech team at that point. But then when I was getting ready to go to college, I didn't know where to go or what I was going to do, where I was going to attend. And our family was friends with a professor who taught here at College of DuPage. And my mom said, "We have to go see him." And I said, "Okay." And we sat in his basement, and we talked all about college and what to do. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and like you, I thought I was going to teach English and writing and literature and theater type things, right? And Jim Colley said to me, "Why don't you come to COD and you can be on the speech team?" That sounded great. "I'll help you find a job on campus." That sounded great. So I came, and then I still pursued all of my English degree, but by the time I went to my 4-year institution, I really loved the communication discipline. And so in looking at the college catalog, I needed, 3 more classes to get a full major versus a minor for teaching high school. And I thought, I'll just get a major. And if for some reason I don't like teaching or I need to flex somehow, I think I can market my communication degree. And then all the time I taught high school, I taught part English, part speech. And then when I got divorced and came to College of DuPage, it was all speech all the time. And like you, I'm very, very passionate about the discipline. I really get frustrated beyond belief when I listen to other people talk about, say, core classes that students should be taking. Communication doesn't show up enough.
Right.
So.
I was a shy kid when I went to middle school, private school, less than 30 kids in the class. And I went to public high school where my graduating class was several hundred. And I knew I liked creative writing, I knew I liked reading, and I knew I liked movies. I'm a big movie nut. And so when I went to high school, I carried all those interests with me, but my intention was to sit in the back of the classroom, do all my coursework, go home, watch a couple movies, read a little bit, and not be social at all. At 12 going on 13 years old. I was a year younger than all of the other freshmen going into public school. And a teacher saw some of my creative writing and said, we really, if you could take this level of writing and articulate it aloud, I think you'd be great on our speech team. And so I did speech in conjunction with writing for our campus paper and still doing things creative, but speech competitively became an outlet for writing speeches about my interests. When I went away to college, teaching was not on my mind. I wanted to either be a journalist or be a film critic, right? Mm-hmm. So I got degrees in journalism and in film study, and I graduate, and I realize, A, there is no job fair where anybody is going to be saying filmmakers wanted. And I quickly learned I graduated about the time that newspapers were dying off in terms of print publications, and nobody was hiring. So I did a lot of soul searching and came to the realization that my interest in those two subject areas stemmed from teachers, specifically those who instructed speech and encouraged me to come out of my shell. So I went and visited the campus advisor for communication studies, who's kind of a guru of the organization we belong to. And he said, we have a communication education program here if you want to become the type of adult who inspires young people like you were inspired. And that's how I got into it. Once I got my first teaching job, there was a speech team. It was established. They didn't need a coach, but the coach there saw something in me, the same way my high school teachers saw something in me. And so after a year, that teacher said, I'm giving up speech to go into admin. I want you to take over our speech program. So everything has come full circle. I got into this to do what I am able to do, and that's see those shy kids come into the room and using public speaking to tap into any of their interests, not just communication studies.
Well, it sounds like all of you are right where you want to be, passionate about it, and everything led right to this point. That's great in general. I mean, you don't talk to everyone that just loves what they're doing, and it's obvious that each of you do love what you're doing and see that it does make an impact, which I think is perfect when we're talking about the power of public speaking. There's truly a power behind it. All right, well, so let's talk about this project.
We had the Illinois Communication and Theater Association had was concerned about what was happening with communication education in Illinois. Mm-hmm. So what really prompted some of the work that led to what we've just done was the fact that Illinois State University was the last communication education program in the state of Illinois preparing teachers, and the university announced that they were going to eliminate the program. And it had to do with the fact that teachers couldn't get jobs with communication degrees because of everything had shifted towards English. Mm-hmm. So the association had become involved in a project to work with the Illinois State Board of Education about licensure. So the fact that we needed well-trained professionals, whether they were English majors or communication majors, to teach communication in the high schools in the state of Illinois. So in the work that our association did, and we had some people really involved and really engaged in that work, doing really good stuff. But in the work that they had done with the Illinois State Board, they had reached a point where the board came back and said, look, we just don't have the funding. We totally agree with you. We think you're absolutely right. We need well-trained teachers. We just don't have the money nor the manpower to be able to ensure that that happens. And because of some of the other national trends with No Child Left Behind and things, it was we had kind of hit a wall, right? So then the association started to work with this advocacy project. And that's where Anthony can pick up the story.
There's an advocacy committee that's a part of ICTA. And at the onset of this project, Lauren and I met with our local legislator. And as Lauren mentioned, the licensure issue in Illinois, that stems back to the early 2000s. It used to be, to become an English teacher in our state, you could go a number of various routes, get an endorsement in literature, or an endorsement in writing, or an endorsement in communication education. And that went away with No Child Left Behind, an emphasis placed on standardized testing, and also the State Board of Education having its resources cut, said, why don't we just fold all of these endorsements into an English language arts certificate, now a license, and speech will take care of itself. Obviously that did not happen. So Lauren and I met with a legislator, and he said, the approach you're taking maybe you shouldn't start with certification. At one point, the majority of Illinois high schools had a speech required class. Why don't we make that the focus? Let's try to bring that back, a required speech course in Illinois. It's easier to bring something back that once existed versus trying to start something out of thin air. Right. And he tasked us with, can you create a timeline showing the rise and fall of speech education in our high schools, naming names, pointing to the politicking that happened that eliminated the endorsement, and also provide some research on the impact that a lack of communication skills is having on the Illinois workforce. So that's what we started with, and then put all that together, the research and the timeline. And Lauren and I presented it at the ICTA convention, and that's where Heather comes into the picture.
So I had attended the session on advocacy to find out the state of speech in Illinois. And I was very inspired by what I heard, because I thought, there could be something here. Like, there are people in this organization who are as fired up as I am about speech communication and communication ed in Illinois. And so I went to the session, and Lauren then asked me to be involved in the advocacy committee. My district had been going through some kind of curricular restructuring, and I was a little fearful that communication education may get enveloped into something, something else. And so then flash forward maybe a year, it was towards the end of last summer, I called Lauren one afternoon and I said, I've known my state legislators for a couple of years, because I'm from a very small town, and so where everybody knows everybody. And I said, do you think it would do me any good? Should I give them a call and just see what they have to say about this? So she said, yeah, give it a try. What do you have to lose? So I called my local legislators and basically approached them with the question of is there something to this? What approach should we take? Or could you give us some advice about where to go? Or if this is, something that somebody who might be able to help us with this. And both of the people that I spoke with were I think both of them thought speech was already a requirement in Illinois. And when I presented them with Anthony's research and his documents that he had worked so hard to put together, they both said, yeah, this seems like something kids need. This seems like something we should have in Illinois. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what we can put together. We'll see what we can kind of get moving. And so then that brought us to the point where we had a couple of pieces of legislation in the on the Illinois floor for consideration during the last legislative session.
What we quickly learned was that there are two dirty words in Springfield at our state capitol: unfunded and mandate. And so the focus then shifted from the initial discussion that Lauren and I had with our legislator to the legislation itself. Two different pieces, one in the House, one in the Senate, with identical language that would add speech to the school code as an option. There's a section in the school code that says a student must take at least 1 year of a fine art, foreign language, or vocational study, and speech would be added to that list. And that's what the legislation would entail. So not a mandate. But again, with that goal of working backwards toward, if it's in the school code, we can make that argument about certification to make sure that teachers are taught how to teach it.
So really, what you're talking about is going to be a series of stepping stones, and this is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I said this earlier, we were pretty just kind of gung-ho and a little naive and jumped in with both feet just to see what happened, and really had to follow the lead of the legislators to some degree. And at points, we were in communication with each other at 2:00 in the morning and at all kinds of different times, because things were happening legislatively on a schedule that we were not familiar with, and you just have to be willing to be responsive. And I think that was really the thing that played in our favor, was willingness, and then relationships. That Heather had these relationships, and it was pretty serendipitous that these pieces just sort of fell into place at the same time.
Everybody knows somebody. So it became, I knew this person, I know this person, well, this person knows that person, and all the web of resources became woven together. And like Lauren said, there was one moment where a legislator said, can you guys come up with this information in a document, a single sheet of paper? There's going to be a hearing tomorrow. I just heard about it. And so we were texting and emailing and drafting until about 2:00 in the morning to make sure that document got to that legislator by that morning. And I think one of those times then it was delayed, which was kind of do we take this as a downfall, or does that give us one more opportunity to fix our drafts? But
yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know now, would you still pursue it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we got an education.
Yeah.
I got a front row seat to the Illinois legislative workings. And so, I think we definitely know more now than we did a year ago, and we're going to keep working on this. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to use what we've learned to inform our next steps.
Yeah. I think the thing that I'm anticipating, I suppose, is that we're going to have to do some traveling to get in front of people, to be able to talk to them. And it really does speak to the things that I sometimes tell my students about making things happen. You have to be tenacious, and you have to have some perseverance, and you really do have to put yourself in front of people.
Right.
So my understanding of legislative days, when my college sends students down to talk to legislators, I have a very different understanding of that than I did before we started this process. Yeah.
So what's the state of the legislation at this moment? What steps has it come to? You said it was put together, so what happened from that?
So a piece of legislation was introduced in the House. I think it was in February. And shortly thereafter, the legislation was introduced in the Senate too, and it so that was both sides of that were kind of working simultaneously. In April, the House bill passed unanimously, and the Senate bill also passed overwhelmingly. And then both pieces of legislation went to the opposite chamber to have discussion, debate, and be voted on and so forth. And they got stuck. The bills got stuck. So they're currently sitting in committee. The legislative session ended on May 31st. So that doesn't mean that the legislation that, we worked with the legislators on last year could never come back. But for right now, it's stuck.
So if each place said this sounds great, and they passed it across the hallway or whatever happens, why did they not? What stopped it there? What was it like? Oh, now this will actually be real, and we can't go that far. Or what was the problem?
There are valid concerns on the part of some legislators about the impact that this would have. Would it force a school district to have a speech class if they don't already have it? And how might taking that course instead of one of the other courses in the school code impact a student's ability to apply to certain colleges or universities? And again, those are valid questions that require answers. To our understanding, the legislators who have those questions are willing to sit down and talk about them. So it's not a dead issue. It's just a bump in the road, a humbling bump in the road.
So they're concerned about those two dirty words you said, unfunded and
It is part of it.
That's part
yes.
of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so legitimate concerns or not legitimate concerns, why is it important to see things like this come about, start that conversation, and maybe next legislative sessions start up with this or something else similar and keep this ball rolling? Why is it important?
I think I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think all three of us are really committed to ensuring that students have education and communication, right? It's a fundamental skill that the workplace wants. It is a skill and a knowledge base that needs to be delivered by qualified teachers. And so having that legislation is a first step to ensuring not only that our students are getting the education, but that the most qualified people are in the classroom delivering that education.
Right.
I think, too, a really important thing is when there are, throughout high schools in Illinois and across the country, teachers are going to ask students, do a PowerPoint presentation, or tell us what you know, or be able to stand up and explain thus and such. And so the ability to communicate well orally doesn't go away. It doesn't end when you walk out of your last day of high school or your last day of college, right? So we have to be able to build skills with students for communicating effectively in an oral way. And so I think that one big task of a communication educator is to focus on the method of the message. Because if you just want to know something, you can read it in a book, read it in a binder, see it on the internet, but it's how you as the communicator are putting that information out there and how you're interacting with your audience and how you're living the same and breathing the same air as your audience, and you're focusing on your audience's responses to your message. And that really that is the piece of communication education that I don't think kids get anywhere else, is really how to focus on that message on the audience you have in front of you, and to do that in real time in that moment. There's no rewrites, there's no editing, there's no do-over in communication, so you just really have to know how to manage that message well in that moment.
Yeah, and teaching public speaking is the one course where students can really focus on those verbal skills, nonverbal skills, developing self-awareness, building their confidence so that they can communicate orally. And, although we know they're communicating via technology a lot, and they're texting all the time, we also know there's research coming out that says it's harming their ability to do this kind of interaction and communicate face-to-face with people. So that is the realm of communication educators. And if you're an English teacher, you may have gone through school and had none of that. So in our own state, the language arts approach puts, frankly, those language arts teachers in a bind. Because if they're expected to teach those skills, but they don't really know how, and if they come with any communication apprehension of their own, I think it's just a recipe for disaster for not just the teachers, but obviously the students.
Right.
It's also proving to be the recipe for disaster, and one of the things that in the workplace, in the workforce, and that caught the attention of the earliest legislators we spoke to. The early research that we performed, one term kept popping up across various sources from various scholars, and that was a communication crisis. That young people coming out of college right now and entering the workforce do not know how to adequately communicate. And it's impacting Illinois' workforce, and it stems all the way back to, well, what are we doing at the high school level, let alone at the college level? It used to be, at the very least, you could expect that a student had the required COM course, COM 101. Well, now there are colleges and universities that don't even offer that anymore. And in the research for the timeline, that was one of the things that the Illinois State Board of Education back in the early 2000s said, well, at the very least, they're getting COM 101. 19 years later, that's not the case.
Yeah, and from my perspective as a communication instructor at a college, if those students could dip their toes in the water with a course in high school, it not only gives them a foundation of knowledge and skills when they come to college, but it might turn them on to taking some of those other communication classes that they might not otherwise take, because they're walking into college like, well, I'll take the basic class and then, I'm done.
That's really what happened with me. I took the dual credit class in high school and then got so much out of that, ended up taking the advanced course. I had to add it on to my load, but it was well worthwhile.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get that at all if you never took the basic course even. I mean, as an engineer, you got to know how to communicate. You wouldn't have any formal education in it at that point.
Right.
The one thing I always say to my students is, you're not in this class to fulfill a graduation requirement. At my school, it's still a graduation requirement, right? But so I say, you're not just here to get that mark on your transcript so you can get your diploma and walk across the stage. You are here to acquire a life skill. This is a life skill. Here we're going to look at, what does it take to be a human who can interact with other human beings and forge those positive relationships. And so, for me, I think back to my own high school education. I took anatomy, right? I could not tell you the names of all the muscles and bones and things that I had to memorize. I took physics. I could not tell you physics theories and work out formulas in chemistry. But the communication education that I received has helped me immensely and will continue to do so. And I believe it would help me even if I weren't a teacher and even if I were not a communication educator. I mean, just think about the ways that we have to navigate our personal relationships and overcome conflict and create and maintain friendships, and sometimes speak and give information to people through oral means. So I just think that it's about learning to be a good person, and that's what communication education can give students. That's why I think our students in Illinois need it, and across the country. This is really not just something that we can say, oh, only the students in this district need it, or only the students in Illinois need it. This is something everyone needs.
One of the reasons that this is doing a communication class in high school is so important is because, like Anthony was saying, it's workforce preparation. So, I can't imagine any of us doesn't want our students ultimately to be gainfully employed and self-sufficient at some point, right? So if you look at all the workplace research, it talks about the fact that employers want employees that have good communication skills. And top of the list always is oral and written communication skills. So again, one course in college gets them exposure, but if they start in high school, it really lays the foundation. And it's the course where, as Heather was saying earlier, we focus on interaction. We focus on, okay, how do I relate to you? How am I communicating with you? How do we do that as friends? Or how do we do that as colleagues at work? How do we work as a team together? And I think that often the term soft skills is what's used collectively to describe all of that, which just really gets my goat all the time because I hate the term. And a friend of mine said to me a couple years ago, "Why do you hate it?" "I think that means interpersonal." And I said, "Oh, I'd never thought of it that way, but I think the majority of my perception is the majority of people, when they hear soft skills, it's sort of this you have it or you don't." And anyone who studies communication knows it isn't a matter of you have it or you don't. There are specific theories about communication that have been researched. There's documented research on what's effective and ineffective, appropriate and inappropriate. And in public speaking, students really get to focus on themselves and practice those skills. They get to put like a magnifying glass on what they're doing. I always say to my students, I would love to follow you around in life, be a little fly on the wall, watch how you interact with people, point things out when like that wasn't a good way to handle your conflict, but that would be awful, right?
Yeah.
I said, but in public speaking, it's the one place where you get to see yourself being presentational, and then analyze along with the other people or your audience members what the impact was, right? And I don't see that as soft in any way, right? I think that, and they're necessary skills if you are going to be gainfully employed and a productive citizen.
To me, yeah, that's what soft skills has always implied, is that you may have it. It might be nice if you did, but you don't necessarily have to have it. But a hard skill is something you have to have. So I would say this is a hard skill if you're going to talk about it in those terms.
Right.
No?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what is the situation in other states?
Let Anthony
Well,
take that.
We know that,
Gonna go to his notes.
yeah, we have Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, North Dakota, and South Dakota require high school speech. California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Louisiana, Maryland, Missouri, New York, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas have similar language in their school code to what we were seeking in the legislation that's currently sitting in committee.
Which is one of the reasons that when we started this past year talking with the legislators and they were going to put some legislation together, they looked at, well, what are the trends? What's out there? How is it treated in other states across the country? And so one of the legislators I talked with had some relationships with other legislators from other parts of the state, and they had done some research. I had done some talking together and decided that offering speech as an option was the way to go to bring us in line with these 11 other states. So 6 that have it as a requirement in the school code, named as communication. It appears there in the state code, school code. There would be 11 states that have it as an elective option. We were working on trying to get Illinois to be the 12th state there. Then there are 3 other states in the union that have in their school code, it says speech can be adopted at a local level. So kind of leaving it up to those individual school districts across those states. So that still leaves us at about fewer than half of the states in the country that have something on the books when it comes to communication ed.
So knowing that, what if someone's listening in one of those states that they're in the other half, what can they do? Hearing that maybe the reason you all took off down this path is you didn't understand how long the path was. Would you encourage them to try something out? I mean, what's the next steps for you all? Could they start with that in mind? And
Well, I would say come to our convention in September, and we're actually, Heather and I are on the board of the association, so we're going to a meeting tomorrow to find out how the convention is going to be sort of scheduled and everything. But there's some programming dedicated to allowing us to speak to what's happened, And I think that would be awesome if some people from other states came and joined us.
Yeah.
You know, just to hear what we're doing and find out kind of, again, the story. Hopefully they'll watch this and learn a little bit of what we did. And I would say, yeah, go for it. I think if other states would get in touch with us, I mean, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I'd be willing to partner with them to help also.
For anyone who is listening or viewing, my thing was never be afraid to pick up the phone.
Right.
We rarely met a legislator or somebody involved in teachers unions, or at one point people who fund professional development in other areas. Whenever we spoke to anyone or wrote a letter or wrote an email, 99 times out of 100 we got a response. At one point, when one of the two pieces of Illinois legislation was coming up for a vote, and a message was sent out to the membership of our organization: try to contact your local legislator or these legislators who will be discussing the bill. I know a bunch of people who made the call or sent an email and either got a call back or got a reply back: I will take your opinion under advisement in looking at this legislation. And it wasn't just your automatic click to reply the standard copy and paste. It was specific to what we were going for.
That's good to hear. I mean, I think a lot of people probably have in their head that no one wants to hear from me, or that this won't get anywhere, or no one will listen, but that doesn't sound like that was the case at all.
When we discussed earlier that there are legislators with hesitation, immediately out of the gate, when asked, can we meet with these people, the answer was yes. We'll set up a time. So it's not like anybody, like I said, 99 times out of 100, nobody is stonewalling us.
No.
Go ahead.
And we really received some compliments too about just the work that we did and how far we got without kind of knowing what we were doing in some ways. People were pretty impressed. And again, I think that just speaks to the fact that we have communication backgrounds and we can write well and we can speak well.
Right.
And it really was, I think, the speaking part.
Yeah.
So
that did it.
That and the power of public speaking, what we're talking about, the need for this, actually helped you all get this as far as it got.
Definitely. And I think the building the relationships with people and just, getting in front of people and to be able to say, like, here is a concern that we have, and do you see any way you can help? I mean, bottom line, in any state of the union, it doesn't matter where, you're not going to get anywhere unless you ask and make a phone call and talk to people. And I think that's the key. So any other state, any other group, any other state organization that wants to try to do something like what we are trying to do, I think they have to pick up the phone call, or pick up the phone, make the phone call, and try.
Yeah.
I don't regret any step of this along the way.
No.
We learned a lot. We've definitely learned a lot. We're going into the next year of this, the next phase of this, knowing more. And we're older and wiser.
Yeah, and we when some of this started, I had a local legislator come into my classroom because they teach a class on the presidential election every 4 years with a political science professor and an English professor at my college, and this legislator had said he had helped other educators get some legislation passed, and I was like, I think this is it, and that is the first time in my life, frankly, that I went to a local legislator's office with Anthony and sat down and talked to this person, and he was with us for about an hour. It was on a Tuesday night at 8:00.
Right before a holiday.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he said, yes, okay, I'll meet with you.
With his son taking notes.
Yeah.
Family business.
Yeah, and it was just, it at that moment I thought, oh, this is, Not it was not that the process was easy, but that first step was easier than I thought it was.
Right.
And I think the one thing that's been reinforced for me is our legislators really do want to do good work. They get lambasted all the time, and certainly some of them do some not great stuff, but I think our experience has been that these people really were in our corner and took off on some things that, surprisingly, in a way that I would have never anticipated. They really advocated for us in a way that I just didn't think would have happened that, frankly, as quickly as it did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like everybody understands it's a good cause. It's a good thing to fight for and to pursue. So that's good. It's good to hear. And I think hearing that should be an encouragement, because it's that first step that stops so many things. Nobody wants to take that first step. But I'm glad you all took that step. And we'll be sure to put your all's information, all the information that we mentioned in the link, whether you're listening or watching. You can access that there and reach out to all of you. I hope that this helps stir up other people, and you'll find other people who know people who know people.
That'd be great.
Continue that stream. So not that everything you have been saying isn't something that you want to leave with the audience, but I wanted to ask you, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you haven't mentioned or that I didn't ask about that you wanted to leave with the audience?
I would say, we talked a little bit about forging a relationship with the legislators, but I think having relationships with colleagues across your state is also important. And I know that for me, and I've said this before, the Illinois Communication and Theater Association, I joined when I first moved to Illinois as a way to get some lesson ideas. I needed some help. I was a young teacher. But I feel like I've gotten so much just professionally and personally from the relationships that I've been able to build through that state organization. And so I would say that there's a real benefit to getting involved in your state organization. And it doesn't really, maybe there isn't a communication organization in every state, but certainly there would be for, different disciplines, like maybe English teachers or math teachers. And so I would really encourage people, get outside of your own building, get outside of your own department, and find people to connect with. Because, I've worked very closely with Lauren and Anthony this past year, but there are lots of people at ICTA that I have professional relationships with now, and I'm a better teacher because of that.
Yeah, and I keep getting that Margaret Mead quotation keeps going through my head too. Never doubt what a group of small, committed individuals can do together, right? And I think to Heather's point, being professionally active as an educator is really, really important. And I'm very fortunate that my college really supports me, not only doing my local engagement or statewide engagement, but also national engagement. So seeking out those opportunities and going to find out what is the newest stuff and how do I connect with people.
Right. Thank you all again for joining us on this episode. I really appreciate not only you being here and talking about it with me, but what you're all doing as, like I said, an engineering student that was forced to take an oral comm class, who then went on to voluntarily take another one. I appreciate what you're doing, because without, with this, I'll not say without it, but with it, others like me and many others can get this skill set, and I think something that truly can affect people personally and professionally in ways that you really can't quantify. So thank you all for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.